Today I want to talk about this little camera right here, the Sony RX100 M1. This is quite an old camera actually. It was released more than 10 years ago in 2012. So because it's so old, I'm not going to do a very technical review on this. It's more a review on my experience, what I like, what I don't like, and if I would recommend getting one of these in 2023. But first, let's start talking about how I ended up buying this camera that's more than a decade old. It all started earlier this year when I felt that I was in a photography and an overall creative slump. I felt I had lost the spark I had in the beginning of just going out and capturing images. I realized that part of the fun in taking photos is doing so spontaneously. It's taking a picture when the opportunity presents itself. So I wanted something that I could easily carry around with me every single day. That's when I started to look into the compact camera market. Of course, my first options in this market was Fujifilm. But because there's a lot of hype surrounding this brand, it's hard to find a good deal on used cameras. So I started to look at other brands in the used market, and that's when I found this little guy. It costed me 300 Canadian dollars, or around 220 US dollars. A pretty good deal considering that most compact cameras I found were $400 or more. But it doesn't end there. The camera came with a couple of accessories that make the deal even better. So it obviously comes with the charger, but it also came with a hard case. This is like a Pelican hard case. It's a cool little thing to have, but most importantly, it also came with a waterproof case. It's not something I'm going to use every single day, but this alone is worth a couple $100 and it's going to be really useful on vacations. So in the end, I was very pleased with the price I got for this whole package. For the purpose of this video though, I'm only going to be talking about the camera. Of course, a camera this old and at this price point is going to have some negatives. If you look online, you can find the full spec sheet to see if there's any technical limitations for you. In my case, there's been just a couple of issues that I found and that I've had to work with. The first little issue is the lack of a viewfinder. There is just a screen, and sometimes I find myself wanting to look through a viewfinder when I take pictures, but the screen has been more than enough, to be honest. So I don't think this camera needs a viewfinder, but it would be useful to have one. Then the other issue is about the overall video capabilities of this device. This camera shoots only at 1080p at 60 frames per second in AVC HD, and it shoots at a weird 1440 by 1080 at 30 frames per second in MP4. Of course, Full HD in this day and age seems slow, but I honestly just bought this camera to capture moments in life and keep memories, so the resolution is not a big deal for me. The formats it used to record video are a bit trash though, and I think that's my main problem with it. The best option would be to use AVC HD, and it records at just 28 megabytes per second. And then if we go into MP4, it gets worse. It's not only the weird resolution, but it also records just at 12 megabytes per second. Just to put it in perspective, my mirrorless camera at the lowest bitrate it can record in Full HD is 100 megabytes per second. So for sure you won't be getting a lot of information out of the videos of this little camera. But again, I bought the camera mainly to carry with me everywhere I go and to take pictures. And at this, it has been really good. I've carried this camera all summer long. I've taken it out to family gatherings, on city walks, on road trips, going out with friends, and even taking it to sets. It's always in my bag or in my pocket in case something catches my eye. This camera can shoot RAW and JPEG simultaneously. So whenever I need to edit a picture, I use the RAW file, and whenever I need to share it immediately with somebody else, I just use the JPEG. It's really a perfect combination for how I use this device. Another useful feature of this camera is the zoom, which has allowed me to properly frame certain shots. Even though I feel like sometimes zooming all the way in reduces the image quality. That's why most of the times I shoot at the widest focal length. Another cool feature is the flash, which allows you to take some creative pictures at night. I also like the simple interface it has. My favorite function for sure is the front ring that it has here, that you can program to control different things like your aperture or your ISO. Personally, I use it to control the EV or exposure value. I keep this camera mostly on program mode, and I keep the settings on auto. It usually does a good job at metering the scenes, but sometimes when the scene has a high contrast, I feel like it tends to overexpose the image. So in these cases, I use the EV control to reduce the exposure by 2/3 of a stop. And that's why I keep the ring to control the EV. I can easily adjust the exposure to my taste and then let the camera figure out the rest. Another option if you want to reduce the blur in your images is to set it to shutter priority mode. That way you can control the shutter speed with the back wheel and use the front wheel to still adjust the EV to your liking. That's how I use the camera when I want more control over my image. I just really like the pictures it produces, especially in street photography. It has a very particular feeling. It feels modern, but at the same time a little bit vintage. I don't know why, I feel like it handles the highlights a little bit like a film camera. Of course the look is not exactly the same, but if you take the raw files and edit them, you can get it to look a lot more vintage if that's what you want. Most importantly, this camera got me to fall back in love with photography. This camera has allowed me to rediscover the spark that I had lost. I found joy again in capturing places, moments, and light. Through this device, I've learned to appreciate the little things that happen around me. I've become more aware of the beauty in regular life. And this beauty at some points has provided me with gratefulness of just being here. Yes, this is an old camera, but it's not only about the camera, is it? It's about the experience it provides. And let me tell you, this little camera provides most of the joy of photography at a much lower cost and complexity. By the way, the footage in the previous sequence, including this shot right here, was shot on the RX100, and I upscaled that in post to 4K. So the video features can still be used if you want to go for that vintage vibe. So do I think this camera is worth it in 2023? Absolutely. If you just want a simple, fun camera to capture your day-to-day life, this is an amazing option. Now, it depends on the price. I wouldn't recommend you paying a fortune for this little guy. I would also recommend to keep an eye out for the RX100 Mark III. There are some significant improvements, and if you find one at a good price, it's a great option as well. I want to end this video by saying that it's not necessary to buy the latest and greatest camera to find pleasure in this hobby. It's not necessary to get all the gear that gets recommended on YouTube, or to buy the camera that everybody else is buying. Sometimes just looking in the used market in your area, you could find a gem. Find a device that fits your needs instead of creating a need based on a device. That's it for this video. See you next time.